Hi everyone, welcome back to Winging It. We're on week 2 and our second week prompt is always going to be a word prompt. So this week we're using the word snow. Now that might have already started getting your creative juices flowing. I'm going to be using some beads and buttons in my piece this week. So if you want to grab some embellishments, I'm going to be showing you how to add those into your work. So grab your needle and thread, grab your fabric panel and a pair of scissors and a cuppa, and let's get sewing. Hi everyone, I thought it would be good to start by looking at some inspiration first so that we can get our creative juices flowing. So I've been collecting together my white resources, so just to take you around the table. So I've got some beads here, little seed beads and some shimmery beads and some pearl beads and things like that, which I may or may not use. I've got my machine silks again, just because I quite like the shimmer of them. I've got some normal 6-strand embroidery thread. This is DMC. I normally sew with Anchor, but this is DMC. And just as a little tip, if you use 6-strand embroidery thread, I think a lot of people wind them onto bobbins, and I do have some of my threads wound onto the flat plastic bobbins, but I do find that it tends to crimp the thread if you leave it on there long enough. So my actual preference is to wind things onto wooden clothes pegs, because you don't get the creases in your thread in the same way. You don't actually have to thread them onto anything. You can use them straight from the skein, and people tend not to because they get into a tangle, but there's a bit of a trick to this. So with DMC, if you find the loose end that is closest to the colour reference and pull from there, it will just unravel really cleanly, and I tend not to unravel it more than 2 folds from the skein, and that's the length of thread that I tend to use. So just as a little tip, you can use them straight out of the skein and avoid tangles. It's slightly different with Anchor, so when I'm next using an Anchor thread, I'll give you the tip for that one. I've got my linen threads here that we talked about last week, and my pearl cotton. And I've also dug out I've got some more sort of pearly and crystally beads here. Some white sequins I've dug out because I don't tend to use sequins very often. And again, I might not use all of this. I'm just giving you some ideas of things to use. So I found some white sequins. And my favourite thing I'll talk about in just a second. I'm going to be working on black today. So I've got my 8x8 centimetre piece of black felt, and once again I've left myself a 1 centimetre border all around. These I've got out of my button box. I brought the felt in so that you can see them a bit better. So these are vintage, and I think probably some of them are antique now, because they were my grandmother's mother's. These are little mother of pearl buttons, or shell buttons, and they are just so gorgeous. I love them. So these are the fronts, and you can see the sort of, they vary in shade. Some of them are sort of creamy white, some of them are almost beigey. I've got one that's an sort of iridescent mother of pearl grey, but what I love so much about them is the backs. So if you turn them over, probably won't use them this way round in this week's project, but if you turn them over, they've got the most gorgeous sort of markings on the back that are from the shells that they were taken from, and they are so interesting and different and give such a lovely earthy quality and texture to your work. So I've just dug out some of those, and I'm feeling like I might want to put some buttons on to my piece today, buttons and beads. So I've I've got those out. So we'll just keep those to one side until we're ready, and I'm just going to move my felt out of the way. So I've been thinking about snowflakes, and I was reminded that a couple of years ago I started journaling, and I created a title page for each month. I themed my January pages around snow and spent quite a bit of time. I sort of watercoloured in the background. It's not watercolour paper, so it didn't work very well. But I used a white gel pen and a silver gel pen to create snowflakes. And so I just played around with lines, basically, little lines and circles. So I'm only going to use lines this week. But I thought I'd have a look and maybe take some inspiration from some of these. I was out looking around some shops in Lincoln, and I went into Flying Tiger and found a stamp set, and I've stamped this in silver, so I'm going to keep moving it so the light picks up. But they've got a little snowflake stamp set, and again, a lot of these are created with just really simple straight lines. This one here in particular, it's almost like fern leaves. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but a lot of these could be interpreted with straight stitches. So I've got some snowflake designs nearby, and I'm going to work around some of these on my piece of stitching for today. So it might be worth you just pausing and doing a little bit of doodling and creating some snowflake doodles that you can then interpret in stitch. What I'm going to do as a starting point is I'm going to draw some circles on my black felt using my circle template. I'm going to get my trusty heat erasable pen. When I watched the footage back from last week, I found it showed up much better than I was expecting it to. So that was quite handy. I'm going to do some circles of different sizes, and this is going to just give me a sort of steer for keeping my radiating lines all the same. So I'm just going to mix it up a little bit and pull together a composition. I'm just going to do snowflakes all over this. If you wanted to, you could do a snow scene, but I thought we don't want every week to take forever. So last week's, I don't know about you, actually took a remarkably long time to do those straight stitched swirly lines. So I thought I'd do one that was a little bit less time intensive this week. I don't want you all feeling like you're gonna have to spend 5 hours each week to keep up. So I'm just trying to vary the size of the circles and keep it a little bit random across the square. And I'm sort of going to doodle with thread this week. That's all I'm going to do. So I'm just going to play around, do some straight stitch doodling, but based around circles. Let's have a little one in the middle. And I'm going to leave a bit of space because I think I might put some buttons in the spaces. So I'll leave that for later. So that's my guide. I'm just going to mark on roughly where my points are going to be. Okay, so that's really all of the prep that I'm going to do, and I'm just going to get sewing. Let's start with stranded cotton. Let's just start with a nice sized one so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to start by putting in my main radiating lines, and then I can play around from that point. So I'm just going to start at the outside and come in through the middle. And then I'm going to go back to the outside and come back down through the middle. So these are just straight stitches from the outside to the centre. So what I'm going to do now is think about ways that I can make this look a little bit more elaborate and exciting. So I think what I'll do is I'll start with, I'm working so hard to restrict myself just to straight stitches, because when you know more stitches, it's actually a fantastic exercise to just keep limiting yourself to 1 or 2 stitches, because it really makes you think about how to make shapes and create patterns and that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do is just put in some straight stitches, just in little V shapes. Okay, so I've put in a little sort of rosette in the centre there, and then I'm going to go around and add these little V-shaped lines to all of the other arms. I'm trying to think of a way of describing the parts of a snowflake. Okay, so there's my first snowflake. I'm just going to tie off my thread because I thought it might be nice to add a few bits of shimmer to this piece. So what I've got here is a beading needle, and it's actually a milliner's needle or a straw needle. And what's good about these is that the end where the eye of the needle is the same width as the whole of the shaft of the needle, apart from the point, obviously. Now they can be tricky to thread, but what's really good about these is that if one end goes through your bead, you know the whole needle will go through your bead. So I'm going to just get some, let's do some of these little white seed beads here. Just going to put some on felt. Just a tip for working with beads. If you are working on a smooth surface like I am, they are likely to go flying everywhere, and so the best thing you can do is tip them onto a piece of felt, because they won't roll around. So I've just realised I've tipped them onto the piece of felt that I'm working on, so I've just got another bit of felt here handy that I can keep my beads on, and they'll just stay put. So I'm just going to test to make sure that my needle will go through my bead. Yep, so that's okay. And I'm going to just give you some tips for working with beads. So you start your thread in the normal way. I've done a few more wraps there just because I'm using a single strand. So I've got 1 strand of embroidery thread here, and I thought it might be nice to put a bead in each of these little V's at the end of my snowflakes. So what I'm going to do is come up from the back in the right place, and I'm going to use my needle to pick up a bead. If you start trying to pick them up with your fingers, you will end up pinging them all around the room. So I've picked up my bead on my needle, and I'm just going to put it down to the felt, and then I'm going to take, so you can see my thread's coming out there, I've got my bead on, and I'm just going to take my needle back down almost where it came out, but just a little bit further along, just so there's a bit of fabric between the entry and exit point, and I'm just going to pull my thread through, and that just positions my bead in place. So I'm going to put one here as well. So I'm just going to bring my needle up at that point, pick up my bead and go back through the felt close to where it came out, and it will just pull the bead flat. So I'm just going to do one more. Like that. Now I've put 3 beads on, and what I'm going to do, which might seem like overkill, but I'm going to tie it off at the back. I'm not going to cut my thread, but I'm just going to put in a knot. And the reason for that is if your thread breaks and you haven't put knots every now and again, all your beads will come off and you'll have to redo the whole lot. If you put little knots, if my thread then breaks further along, these are all still secured because there's a knot at both ends. So every few beads it's worth just putting a little knot at the back just to keep everything in place. Okay, so we've got our first snowflake with some shimmer going on there. And we've got that uneven bit at the middle, so I thought I might put a button there, but looking at the buttons I've got, I think they're going to be too big. They are. So let's have a mooch in here and see if I can find a nice bead that can go in the centre there. Is that going to be too big? Yep. So it's just a bit of trial and error really. I think it needs to be a crystal bead because we've got crystal beads all around the edge. That one's too dark. Bit of trial and error. There we go, that one's quite a nice one. So I'm going to put that in the middle. And that will cover up our uneven centre. So this bead's a bit bigger, so I've just picked it up this time. So just going to pop my bead on like that, tie it off at the back, nice and secure. Okay, there we go. There's my first snowflake, just with thread, so just some normal embroidery thread and some shimmery beads. So I'm gonna fill in the rest of the snowflakes and then I'll come back and show you the finished result. So I'm going to work all the snowflakes in roughly the same way, and add some beads, and then I might put some buttons in the gap. So that's where I'm heading. I'm going to use different types of thread, all based around white thread though. I'm not going to put in any other colours of thread. It's all going to be white threads this time. So I'm going to get on with that, and then I'll come back and show you the finished result to give you a bit of inspiration for yours. Okay, so here's my finished panel. This is the snowflake I began with, and I've added in lots of different snowflakes. I've tried to make them all different, all the main ones anyway, and I've used lots of different threads. So this is the thicker linen thread, this one's the finer linen thread. I've got some pearl cotton here, and these little starbursts that are supposed to be sort of in the background are the machine silk. I've added my shell buttons like I was planning to, and I've tried to use as many different types of white bead as I can. Some are a little bit creamier like these, some are frosted. These are frosted, I really like these ones. And some of them are just pure white pearl beads like these, seed beads rather. So that's what I came up with. I cannot wait to see what you come up with from the prompt. So the prompt is snow. You could do something similar to this. You could just do one really big snowflake. You could do a scene if you wanted to. It's entirely up to you. So do share your work using the hashtag FSH winging it too, and that way we'll be able to see each other's work and just see how each of us has interpreted the prompt differently. So I can't wait to see what you come up with. Have a great week of stitching, happy crafting, and I'll see you next time. Bye.